Okay, before we get into this juicy episode, I want to share with you a holiday promo that's running for all of the month of December. I am offering $200 off my Awakening program. This is a 3-month individual coaching program where I will take you through an arc of an experience to help make sense of a mindfuck of a confusing relationship, process the feelings so that you can actually heal and become the best version of yourself, so that you don't have to experience painful love ever again. This program includes an educational component with modules and videos and action-oriented homework. There's also some guided journeys, guided meditations in there for your benefit. It also includes individual sessions where we are really going to deeply process what has happened and give you that space to regulate your nervous system, to create that relationship with your inner child and really move some of this stuckness that you're feeling. And then you also get accountability support, real time. So when you get that message from your ex, who do you reach out to? Who can help you make that decision on what to say or what not to say? So having that real-time support to help you interrupt the reflex that you have been in. But most importantly, this is a container to hold you while you process what's happened and step into what's next. I really want you to feel safe and supported, to say the thing that is too embarrassing and too shameful in your mind to say to your friends and family. Maybe you don't have anybody else that you can share these things with. And in the safety, you'll find healing. So again, this promo runs for all of December, $200 off this 3-month program. The first step is to schedule a free session so that we can get to know one another and see if this is going to be a good fit for you. And I want you to just imagine and envision this life where you feel so fulfilled and secure in yourself on your own, freeing you to then confidently choose a partner who can align with you in your life and celebrate the woman that you are, because you deserve that and it's so waiting for you. The link to the free session and to the Awakening program is in the show notes below, so be sure to check it out. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to this episode of Lucid Living with Bree, Learn to Live and Love Awake. I'm your host, Bree Wolta, and I am here with one of my best friends and former client, Amy Jenkins. I'm so excited to share with you her story and how she has moved through her awakening journey, through relationships, family dynamics, self-abandonment, all of the amazing moments that you've had in your in what has become your healing journey.
Yeah, it's not over yet.
Yeah. Do you want, well, I do. I want you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you, Bree. I'm so honored to be here. So thank you so much for having me. I love and adore you so much. So this is exciting to be here with you. Yeah, so as Bree said, I'm Amy Jenkins. I'm a holistic coach. So I like working with folks on a mind, body, and soul level. I started my career journey as a therapist. I got my master's in clinical psychology and was about halfway through a PhD in counseling psychology and was like, I don't think this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't know. It's going to play in somewhere down the road. And fast forward maybe 10 or 12 years, got my certification in personal training and nutrition, and just realized, oh, there's all these different pieces to the puzzle that they all connect, that talking through things, having this beautiful base of theory from psychology and being able to talk through things, but also bringing in somatic or body work, nutrition, sleep, movement, all these components come together to really truly heal. So I love tying all that together and working with clients who are kind of stuck in whatever realm of their life. I have clients who are not sure what their next career path choice will be, stuck in kind of maladaptive patterns in their life, or even just I have athletes who are looking to optimize their nutrition. And I always start our conversations with, yeah, we can start with nutrition, but we're going to talk about feelings too. So I love tying it all together. And yeah, it feels so heart aligned to the work that I'm doing. It's taken a while to get here, but I love it so much.
Yes, yes. Watching your evolution too from, because I don't even know how long we've known each
Yeah.
other now, a while. Back when you had short blonde hair, so it was a
Yeah.
very long time. If you aren't watching the video, Amy now has very beautiful, very long brown hair. So timing wise, it took a while to grow
Yeah.
it out.
Well.
But watching your evolution from, when you got your personal training degree and just sort of like wanting to really help people achieve their physical goals
Yeah.
and how that's evolved into like, oh yeah, and there's all this emotional component, and now bringing in the breath work and like how that can help open so many doors in your understanding, your awareness, like your healing. So it's like the body focus has evolved in different ways, whether it's the mind or the physical body. It's all connected.
And ironically, I think it unfolded as my own healing journey unfolded, right?
Yeah, always.
So when I think about when I was starting on the personal training component, I was kind of distracting myself with being as physically fit and like crushing every physical goal and nailing the nutrition. And then, yeah, as I peeled back the layers of that onion, was just like, oh shit, there's a little bit of a wonky emotional layer in here that I haven't wanted to look at. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it's kind of I beautiful to see how they both unfold at the same time of life mimicking art is what they say. Sometimes it's like career mimicking life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Even your word choice of crushing the workouts and nailing the food choices, like that's so masculine.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. And I know we're going to dive into my divorce, but I remember very shortly after we separated, I dove into what the hell is the divine feminine because I identified so strongly as this masculine entity. And so much of my life didn't want to be a woman, didn't want to be a girl. I can remember as like a little kid, not, I don't want to be a girl. So now, yeah, kind of enveloping this, oh, femininity actually is this beautiful, I mean, the balance of the two. And yeah, it's funny. I hadn't picked up on my word choice, but yeah, back in the day, really, really.
Well, it's a masculine industry, and I mean, we could go into a whole deep dive around how nutrition and the fitness culture is geared towards men and not towards women who are cycling and like the whole craziness of it all. But it made me think of The Heroine's Journey. Have you read that book?
No.
Oh my God. I recently read it and recently was like, fuck, I really like, I'm still a little unbalanced in the masculine.
I
That's
need
just,
to read this. Okay.
yeah, for me, that's the default safe place is the masculine. I'll do it. I'll do it perfect. I'll, run myself into the ground, all of the things instead of the feminine, receptive, trusting, intuitive. It's a good book. I'll probably reread it several times,
Yeah,
but
definitely. I'm gonna, well, when I come back and listen to this podcast too, I'll make little notes.
yeah. So let's start by talking about how, or maybe the beginning of the journey on
Sure.
how you've gotten to where you are now in this more awake, more of the time place, because I want to be careful of like we're never reaching the finish point or the awakening or the enlightened moment, right? It's like so many of these falling asleep, waking up, and you just get more skilled at
Yeah.
recognizing
Oh, and you
when
maybe
you're falling
nap a
asleep.
nap a little shorter, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Instead of like a coma, you're in a nap.
My coma began.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if this will resonate with your listeners, but my journey really did begin in childhood. You know, it really began in the roots and the origin. And something I want to say, I'm gonna talk about some hard things, and honestly, I'm gonna name it too. This is the first time in my life I've talked about this publicly, so I'm a
Yeah.
little afraid. There's a little girl in me that's feeling a little like, shameful, like don't put anybody down. And it's like, well, I've even talked to you about this a little bit, and you're like, this is your story. So I'm going to tell my story. But I also want folks to know that as I tell this story, my father has since deceased. So I haven't been able to have conversations with him as an adult. Unfortunately, he died when I was 10. But I talked to him in my heart in the spiritual realm. We have a beautiful connection with others, and we've done a lot of mending and healing on the other side. My mother and I have had quite a few conversations, and it's an ever evolving relationship, and we have our own sleep wake cycles as well in our relationship. So as I talk about this, I do want to instill hope and reality that it is still a process, it is still a journey, but that relationship is improving. And I don't have children, so I cannot necessarily put myself in either of my parents' shoes. But yeah, my journey started very young. Both of my parents are children of abuse as well. And, I'm an 80s baby. And so my parents are boomers. And boomers, by and large, obviously there's shades of gray, we're really a generation that did their own self work. There wasn't a self journey, at least back in the 80s. There wasn't, if you had a therapist, oh, what?
Something was wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Quote unquote, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so they didn't do their own healing at that time. And so I can hold space for both of those things, that a lot of the pain I received was their own pain emitting out of them, whether they meant to or not. And my mom and I've even spoken about this a bit, where she said, I just always thought because I wasn't hitting you, I was doing better than what my parents did. And
Oh,
like, oh, to hear that and to hear
wow.
that's really hard. And there's a lot of compassion there. And there's a lot of compassion for what I went through as well.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and not to get into the nitty gritty of details, I'll just kind of give some context. A lot of my childhood was around saying the right thing, and if you didn't, you were just completely torn down. People pleasing, having the answer right away, and really taking responsibility. Some of these qualities are fine, right? Some of these qualities are taking responsibility for what you did is a beautiful value to instill in your child. But the fear of the ramification if you didn't was maybe that more kind of harsh piece to it. And so I, being my own unique soul, because my brother and I lived the same childhood and we're both very different people, I inherited, or I cultivated, if you will, this people pleasing beyond my own comfort, beyond my essentially abandoning myself. I developed abandonment fears. I was always afraid of not being loved, not being good enough, that love being taken away. And so my fear of abandonment led to abandoning myself at all costs. I would
Mm.
do what needed to be done to be lovable, to be enough.
Yeah.
And it set me up beautifully to be the spouse to someone that I could just people please. And my ex has, their own wounds and has his own journey, if you will, and his own sleep wake cycle. But we were in a very codependent relationship. And I think when we met when we were 20, we met actually when we were 19, 20 years old. And I had a huge crush on him, like from the get go. Oh my gosh. I was like, ooh, who is this?
I recognize that wounding. I want that.
Exactly. And I had just shaved my head. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and my boyfriend at the time was like not into it at all. He was not. There's been a lot of hairstyles over the
I wish
years.
I knew Amy with a shaved head.
Oh, she was fearless. And yeah, so he thought it was cool and he was so interested in me. And I know you've talked a lot about trauma bonding and love bombing. There was some of that in that relationship too, of both of us having these wounded parents and thus being wounded children. And how can we, I wouldn't even say hold space for another, because I don't think either one of us had the skill set to do that, but just how can we collide and how can we numb out? We were both, I had never really smoked marijuana at the time. Don't tell my mom. I'm kidding. But I lived in Oklahoma. It was the early 2000s, and it was very illegal. But he introduced me to marijuana, and I was like, "Oh, this is a fun drug. This calms me down."
Yep.
And we got lost a lot in numbing out together, and I think that set the foundation, unfortunately, for our relationship. When things got difficult, when things became to a breaking point, rather than let's have a real conversation about what's really going on. Let's have that deep inner connection. Let's go to therapy together. It was, oh, fuck it. Let's just know now.
Mhm. Yeah, which is like when two people come together with the intention of, just colliding, right? It's not really I'm a heal and healed is also an interesting word, but like I'm a conscious person around my stuff. I know how this shows up in relationships. If you're not that way coming into relationships, you kind of just like are more transactional. It's like I'm going to be here so that I don't feel abandoned, and you're probably here so that you feel loved or validated or whatever he was getting from the
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's just this constant transaction of what I need from you because I can't give it to myself. And
Yes.
of course, you find a man like that replicates the early dynamic because that's what you learned. And from the early dynamic, you adapted all of these wonderful survival skills of people pleasing and getting your needs met, right? That at one point for little Amy, that was vital. You had to because we need the connection from our parents. We need the you're going to take care of me, right? We need that from our parents. So we just do whatever we need to do to figure out how to get that. And the unfortunate piece is then those patterns get consolidated and solidified in our subconscious, and they just keep running the show into our adulthood, which is why this whole part of being introspective and curious about your trauma and your patterns is so important, because you don't want to be the one passing down like your parents did, even
Right.
though you may not have children, but it's like the people that you interact with, like just everybody that you touch with your wounded places, it affects them. So it's our trauma is not our fault, but it is our responsibility now.
Totally. Totally. And I think that's, to your point, neither one of us was doing the work on ourselves. And so inevitably, we couldn't meet our own needs, let alone each other's. So there
Yeah.
would be times where I couldn't show up for him or he couldn't show up for me. And that just triggers all of those wounds and kind of a domino effect. And inevitably, too, because we were codependent, when one of us was triggered, the other was inevitably triggered. And
Yeah.
so it just created kind of a chaotic cycle for us.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's when we get into those real hopeless places where it's like, oh my God, we're here again. Or, oh my God, we're having the same fight again. Like, it's like Groundhog's Day. If we're not stopping to be like, oh, what's at the root of this? Or why does this thing bother me so much that they're doing? Or where's my part in taking accountability for it? Or am I taking too much accountability for it? Because I know that was in both of our cases with our exes. We took fault for a lot of things that were not our fault.
Yeah. Yeah. And responsibility. I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, probably, of the work that you and I did together. I think that was one of the pieces that just finally clicked for me is, oh my God, I'm not responsible for your happiness and you're not responsible for mine. I'm not
Yeah.
responsible for any of your feelings.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yep.
it's like just that simple and just that complex, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. So you were with him for several years. So
18 and a half years. And I
18.
say that there were so many,
Yeah.
I never want to frame it as like it was all just chaos. We definitely, there was a lot of love there. There was a lot of adventure there. So many positive memories. I can say so many positive things about my ex. He's so
Yeah.
creative, so funny. I do think of him in very fond light.
Yeah.
And it's been 3 years, so that definitely helps. But
Yeah. Yep.
I would never want to talk about him in a disparaging way.
Yeah.
But yeah, 18 and a half years. And there were times, I think one of I can actually remember one memory very vividly of you and I at the gym. And we were talking, and I was going through a phase where I thought we were going to break up. And it's okay that you don't remember this, but I think it's because it was
It
my
might come
own
back to me.
thing. I think it was one of the very first moments I felt very comfortable being like, I don't know what I'm going to do about this relationship. I don't think it's going to last. And it still took, I think, about 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
before we finally ended it.
Yeah.
And um, most of it was because he said very frankly, I mean, if nothing else, my ex was really great about saying, if we break up, I can't have you in my life. I
Mm,
can't be your friend. I can't be around you.
yeah.
And that was his boundary. We didn't set many boundaries with one another, but that was one that I knew. And the
Yeah.
way he said it, I knew he meant it. And so every time I kind of got close to that cliff of saying, I think I'm done, I think I'm ready to move on, I knew it meant full abandonment. That's
Yeah.
what it felt
The
like,
worst fear.
the worst fear right
Yeah.
there in my face.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was ready to say, I would rather be alone than in this relationship, in this cycle anymore.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that, because I think a lot of women who stayed longer than they should, and I say that lightly because it's like,
Yeah.
I believe that we finally come to the place of being ready when we're meant to.
Yeah.
But that moment when you first think like, fuck, this might not be working. And you almost slowly start grieving or slowly start preparing for the grief well before you've left.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case with men. I don't work with men in the same capacity, but so many of my female clients have done that, where they're grieving, they're coming to the realization or that moment of pure knowing
Yeah.
that this is the right decision. And sometimes that takes several years.
Several years.
And there's no shame in however long it takes you to come to that point where it's finally like, the pain of being here is worse than the potential pain that might come from this unknown place of being abandoned and being alone.
Right. And I don't even think I did it consciously, but I think that moment where I started to name it years before we actually did split, um, subconsciously, I began the work there.
Yeah.
I stopped numbing out. I
Yeah.
started focusing on crushing that nutrition. I went to a very masculine place with it, but I
Yeah.
did. I started focusing on self-care from a holistic perspective. I started going to therapy to talk about what was going on. I started doing more holistic healing and seeing spiritual healers. And so I think I needed that more, like I needed my team,
Yeah.
right? I needed my team so that I knew that when this ultimate abandonment came, that I was choosing that abandonment because I was no longer going to abandon myself. I was going to choose me.
Yes. Yes. And the reframe around, this isn't an abandonment, this is a choice for my well-being,
Yeah. Yeah.
is an impactful one, right? When it's not like, oh my God, he's leaving me and I won't be okay. It's like, oh, I'm choosing this and I will be okay because I've surrounded myself with these amazing people that can hold me.
And, you know, when I think about those moments that I like, when I left, it was not the most opportune time for him. I left when I had bolstered myself up, and you and I worked a lot with this. There was so much guilt and shame that I'm doing really well and I've supported myself. He might be actually at the lowest part of his life. And how dare I do this to him when he's going through this?
Yeah. How dare I no longer take care of him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is it's hard to decipher for those of us who have taken care of people our whole lives. It's hard to decipher what is true for you and what is like doing something to punish someone else.
Yeah.
It's like you didn't choose to leave when you did, like to throw him into the lowest point of his life. It was just that was the point where you needed to take care of yourself. And he's an adult man who's responsible for his own feelings and experiences and emotions. And he can get his tribe of people to support him too, right? It's like, oh, I'm not actually, that's not my role anymore. And that's not my responsibility.
And it's funny talking about repeating patterns. Um, I was put in that place at an early age, a team of one. My
Yeah.
mom would often say to me, "You're my best friend."
Uh,
Or, "Why can't you be my therapist?" When I was getting my degrees. Well, why can't you be my therapist? And so I was used to being someone who needed to be the role of the daughter, best friend, and therapist.
yeah.
And so having a spouse now that really isolated himself, um, and really relied on me to be there as support in many different components or different ways. Yeah, it was a role I knew all too well and been
Yeah.
very groomed for.
Yeah. And we go towards the familiar, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's not serving. The familiar is the safe place in our mind, because with the unfamiliar comes all of the unpredictable things that could happen, and we don't control them, and like panic mode. So I'll stay in this painful familiar over the unpredictable, potentially much better place, which you're experiencing now. So
Yes.
what was that moment like for you when you said, I'm going? Like how did you come to that for sure knowing?
I think he actually did it for me to begin with. He started
Mm.
everything in motion. Um, because I honestly didn't have the guts at first.
Yeah.
And through several conversations, we decided to separate. And then, excuse me, as soon as he left, I've never really said this to anybody, so sorry if I'm kind of pausing. As soon as he left, because I don't mean this to be hurtful at all, but as soon as he left, I felt this like tremendous, overwhelming sense of relief
Mm.
and a door closing that I was so happy to have closed.
Yeah.
And that sounds really horrible to say. Because
Um,
again, lovely human being. It wasn't a terrible, it wasn't awful. I could make all the excuses, right?
yeah.
Because I did for so long. And to some degree, I still do, right? I still say, oh, but as soon as he left, I just knew in every cell of my body, this is what I wanted.
Hmm.
And I could feel every cell rejoicing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had to decide how to tell him I actually wanted a divorce because
Mm.
we were just doing a trial separation that I knew pretty much instantly. And so thankfully had therapy. I think I had individual therapy and then I had an individual session with our couples counselor
Yeah.
both that week, which was great. And excuse me, put up sticky notes everywhere. You're allowed to
Yeah.
want a divorce. You can say, writing out how I was going to say that I wanted the divorce. And it was, I mean, I was trembling. I was terrified. It was
Yeah.
funny because I went right back to that little girl who was torn down for saying the wrong thing because I
Mm.
knew in his eyes I was going to be saying the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would probably open a lot of space for him to tear you down, especially
Oh, he did.
if
I had to hang up on
what
him.
you're saying is causing pain for him or uncomfortability or inconvenience, right? Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to thank you first and foremost for sharing some of these pieces that you've not said out loud and being vulnerable in your story. And I can relate to that moment of relief
Yeah.
and to the then coming moments of longing
Mhm.
and missing and grieving. And I think it's important to say that we can hold both of those things. Like we can feel that this was a fuck yes decision in my body, full through and through, and still have that moments of dropping into the nostalgia and remembering the good times and missing that and missing him and missing what was, even if there was pain, even if there was, the uncomfortable experiences. It's like we still had all of those experiences with that person. And the grief doesn't mean you have to hate them forever, but you can hold both. You can hold that duality of knowing.
And it's been 3 years. So it comes less the way it's come less. But I've even talked with my partner now where there are times where I miss laughing with him.
Yeah.
I do miss his friendship. I respect his boundary 100%. I don't think that it would have been helpful for either one of us to try to remain friends, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting. I even catch sometimes wanting to share with him like where my life is now, because my life has done a complete 180.
Yeah.
But I have to honor that he might not be excited for me.
Right.
He may not wish that well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The feeling of the feelings
Yeah.
without having the reaction or the behavior attached to it is such a skill. Like being able to feel that feeling of longing or that feeling of wishing that you could tell him how things were without actually doing it, or doing it before you realize that you're doing it and then getting a really negative result from it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
is a superpower. Like being able to do that it's something that, you know, it's sitting in that discomfort. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the 3 years that you have been post divorce,
Mhm.
what were some of the most impactful moments for you on the healing journey in making sense of the relationship or healing with your inner child? Fill us in a little bit around what felt the most helpful.
Sure. I think so the group work that you and I did in the container was really helpful for me to have kind of a light on of, because I had read Codependency for Dummies, I had read Codependent No More, but it was the first time I could kind of link it a little. I'm trying to think of how to say this. It was kind of like the first time I could see my part in it.
Yeah.
Like I could see how I felt pulled in to the drama and to be the rescuer, but I didn't see how I was also the persecutor and the victim, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so
Totally.
that was just kind of a lights on to see, oh, it's not this, like, codependency isn't this just static thing and you play one role in it. No,
Yep.
it's a moving, flowing, dynamic way of being.
Hmm.
And I had to recognize that because I think by the time we were doing work, I was in the relationship in currently, and
Hmm.
I could see me slowly starting to play those patterns again
Yeah.
and be like, okay, if the one constant variable is yourself,
Yeah.
maybe you're part of the problem. And so
Yeah.
it was, I was able to, and I think that the beauty of that container and the other women that were in that group was that we could see one another, hold space for one another, and it reduced the shame. Something that that I work a lot with, and actually I'll get to this next is breath work, but um, shame and guilt come up so much for me. I'm still in my sleep wake cycle, exploring and understanding this grief, shame, guilt dyad that I have going on, or triad that I have going on.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm doing a journey in 2 weeks that I'll talk about in a little bit too. But um, so I think so having a container of women to really explore things, continuing to go to therapy, doing quite a bit of somatic work. So along this time, I also was just physically a wreck. I've been still battling SIBO, which is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that I believe started in 2020 when I got a really bad stomach virus, and it just, yeah, it's been a lot to try to clear it out. But all of that stress, we talk about cortisol and all of our stress hormones affecting our body's ability to heal itself. So I did yoni steams,
Mm.
mind body connective meditations, and then that led me down this path of breath work. And I've done breath work years ago. I had done it with a beautiful soul here in Denver. Um, and I was like, I think I want to try this again. So I found someone out in here, and I now live in Boulder. So saw someone in Boulder, and I was like, hell yeah, I want to do that. I want to add that tool to my kit for my personal growth, but also to the work that I'm doing. So I mentioned earlier this mirroring of life and career.
Yep.
Again, I felt that whole body yes. And so started a facilitator apprenticeship. And and as a part of that, I do weekly breath work with myself. And the type of breath work that this is around is more transformative. We call it circular connective. So it is likened to, in fact, there's studies right now going on at Johns Hopkins looking at the impact of this type of breath work as compared to MDMA and LSD in treating PTSD and veterans. So it's really potent, beautiful work that you can do within yourself with just your own breath. So
That's awesome.
diving into that has been a game changer.
Yeah.
And that's where I've kind of learned more about this triad. A lot of grief comes up and immediately shame and guilt. And
Mhm.
it's an interesting thing that I'm exploring. Lastly, I'll say I mentioned a journey that I'll be doing. So I am, I've been doing the breath work, but I am going to take it into a little bit of a deeper realm. I'll be undergoing some psilocybin journey in a couple of weeks. And so, my hope there is that I'll be able to prolong that expanse of dropping in to help have some resolution and help me kind of rewire my brain a little bit and have a little bit longer of a time. The breath work I typically do is about an hour.
Mhm.
So this will be 5 or 6 hours, maybe more. We'll see.
Yep.
So I'm hoping for just a little bit more expansive space to amplify and to integrate.
Mhm. Yeah, I think breath work and medicine work and whatever type of medicine you're working with go really well together. Again, because of the body connection
Yeah.
and breath work being more accessible in that, you typically it's an hour and a half. You don't have to be really screened. There's no contraindication, or there may be contraindications, but maybe not to the same degree as medicine
Sure.
work. It's just a little bit more accessible more of the time. And to your point about like dropping in deeper,
Mhm.
that gives you also so much fertile ground to then bring to integrate with breath work and
Yes.
integrate in your therapy. And it's like the experience, because I help to co-create and co-facilitate plant medicine retreats in Costa Rica. And the company that I work with, they put a lot of intentional effort and like specialty in the integration piece. Because if we go and have these experiences and then don't have integration support, like what the fuck is the experience? It's just an experience, right? We're not bringing the wisdom, we're not bringing the learning, the uncovering, we're not integrating those into how we live our life, and therefore we're not going to see change. So for you, having both in like your medicine kit of healing tools is so beneficial, and I'm such a big supporter of all that you do, but I'm so excited for your journey.
I am too. And it's not, I think sometimes people think like, oh, you're gonna you're gonna take some plant medicine and just drop in, and it's so intentional, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 2 weeks out. I've been off caffeine for 3 or 4 weeks now, off of sugar, alcohol, all of these, with kind of cleansing the body and spending more time in nature. Psilocybin especially has that mycelium connection. And so I'm doing lots of grounding meditations, like naked feet in the ground, letting
Yeah.
my mycelium connect with the nature outside. And this may seem a little woo-woo to folks, but it really is this connective piece of I want to connect with nature so that when I take in nature as a plant medicine, I've already been working with it
Yeah.
to a degree, and I've already cleansed my body of some of the toxins that I might have built up. I love coffee, so it's that's been a journey, but
Yeah.
just kind of clearing all that out so that I can receive the medicine in its purest form and really do the work and setting intentions. I'm journaling every day about what's going on, but also intention setting for what I hope to get from the experience.
Yeah, and really treating this with respect.
Yeah.
And not just respect for the medicine, but respect for yourself
Yeah.
and this choice that you've made to put your money and your time and your energy and yourself in this container.
Yeah.
It's like you intentionally showing up is a way that you are showing yourself that you matter.
Yeah. And again, choosing myself, right?
Yes, yes. And I know that breath work for you has been sort of an open door back into trusting your body, trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. Share a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to. That's a great question. So I think one of the things I tell folks who come to do breath work is that this type of breath work is similar to taking plant medicine, but it's just your breath doing it. And so therefore you're in control the whole time. And
Yeah.
just that piece of knowing that you can stop breathing, you can come out of it pretty quickly at any
Yeah.
point you need to. There's
Mhm.
something so empowering there, but also leaning into it. If you start to go there, I've had times where shit's getting real. It gets, I might be reliving a memory or some emotion might be coming up really intensely. It's like, I know I could just stop, or
Yeah.
I could lean into it and know that the reason this is coming up, because again, it's not a substance I've ingested. It is just me and my breath and my brain chemistry, that maybe there's something there I need to look at, that maybe I'm ready to look at it. Maybe I'm already processing it. It's just, because we've got this is such a computery thing to say. We've got front end and back end. So what we see on the website is not necessarily what's all happening in the background, right? Our bodies are the same way. And so I might be seeing a visual or having an emotion. That's the front end pieces. But stuff in that back end has been going on whether I know it or not. Like the whole stuff going on with my gut health is an indicator that things aren't great in my ecosystem that needs to be looked at, right? And
Yeah.
so there's this trust in saying, okay, breath, have your way with me. That's what my mentor always says, that have your way with me, breath. And I
Yep.
really love it because it's kind of this, I trust you implicitly. And
Yep.
so what that means is I trust you implicitly. And this I got you, babe kind of energy.
Mhm. That's so interesting about the control piece because people who reach out to us about plant medicine, and we work with ayahuasca, so it has the reputation of being like the the big one, the grandmother. And people are really afraid of not being in control of that situation. And to your point, it's like whether it's the breath or the medicine, it's going to show you what's already there, that you are it's not going to give you more than you are able to handle. And it might be more than you thought you would see in that moment.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's in the background already. So it's not bringing up these things that are completely like, I don't know, in left field, I guess, of your
Right. No,
experience.
100%. Yeah.
But that piece about being able to control and being able, I think that opens again the accessibility for people, where it's like, because we all want control in some way. We want to have control over the experience. And in breathwork, it sounds like you dance and you flirt with that edge of how expansive can I feel in this moment without pulling away, and how much can I trust myself without losing that connection to my inner guidance.
And I mentioned that I do breath work with myself. I am trained to do that. So it isn't something, much like I would never suggest someone take a plant medicine and go off on their own
Yeah.
as a medicinal journey. Would never suggest that. I would not suggest someone go off and do transformational or circular connective breath work on their own either. Have a guide, either doing an individual session or there's groups, which can be really amazing too, because you've got a group of people who are all having their experiences. So you might hear someone over here laughing hysterically, someone over here screaming or crying, and you're kind of in the middle. You may or may not be having any of those emotions, right? or sometimes you're on the precipice of wanting to release some emotion, but hearing somebody else's emotion push through allows your floodgates to come open. So it can be really
Yeah.
beautiful. But yeah, I 100% recommend someone having someone there to hold that space. So knowing that, yes, I'm in control as I'm flirting with that edge, I'm still being held.
hmm And there's so much medicine just in the experience itself. Like you're talking about someone laughing or someone screaming. I had an experience with plant medicine where someone was laughing and I got pissed. I was so angry that this person was having so much fun in their experience, and I'm over here like having some somatic pain, and just it wasn't a happy experience for me. And what that allowed me to see was how often I allow other people to experience joy and pleasure, but don't believe that I
Mm,
am worthy of that,
mm,
or don't believe that I can relax or not, be the
and access
responsible
it.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, not even from the medicine, it was just the experience of hearing the person laughing gave me so much insight. So doing group experiences, whether it's breath work or coaching or plant medicine, it's like the how we learn from other people and the mirrors that other people get to be for us. It's it's incredible. You can't create that intentionally. Like
Yeah.
I always talk about the people who come into my groups. I'm like, I couldn't have chosen you all to be in this more perfect place together, where it's typical where they'll all share family dynamics, or they're all share, really abusive partners that they're leaving at the same time. Like it's different every time. And it's like, just when I open a container, there's so much trust that's like, okay, I'm going to have 2 or 3 or 4 people in here and it's going to be perfect.
Right.
Whatever it needs to be, beyond what I can see right now.
I had that thought last night. I had a brand new client just sign up. They saw one of my flyers at the climbing gym and signed up for breathwork. I didn't know them, and like, beautiful soul. And I just, after they left, I just like put my hand to chest and was just like, oh my gosh,
Oh,
universe, you really bring me like the best people. Thank you so much.
yeah.
I'm so
Yes.
grateful. And
Yeah.
even to your point, I remember in your coaching container, I mean, first of all, just a lovely group of women. And I remember one woman in particular, her ex was almost like, her story with her ex was nearly identical to mine. And I needed that. I needed someone else to say, I see you, girl. Yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's not, he's not narcissistic. He's not abusive.
Yeah.
And yeah, here it is. And you're not happy, and you can end that relationship.
Yeah, we don't have to wait for it to be something that's abusive.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, you
Right.
know, giving yourself the permission to leave whatever relationship, even if it's a wonderful person, but you're just not compatible anymore, or you're not
Yeah.
aligned with where you want to go. It's like, it's okay. It's okay for you to choose what's best for you. Hands down, full stop,
Your
period.
life. It's your life.
Yeah.
What does your mug
Yeah.
say? I love what you show me your mug. I love it.
Oh, it says live the life you imagine. You see it?
Yeah.
I know. It's once we can see our tendency to choose other people, or the reason that we people please, the fear that's behind that, we get more skilled at tending to that inner child, and therefore can validate her fear and still choose the thing, right? I can validate that she's fucking terrified and still choose to leave. And both of those things are necessary for us to be able to function healthfully in the world. Otherwise, we're staying in things where we're building resentment, and it's hurting us, it's hurting them. It's just, we think we're doing the kind thing by staying in something that's not serving, and it's not kind to anybody.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah.
Yeah,
When we're not living our best lives, we're not showing up for others in the best way.
yeah, yeah.
By the way, I like this phrase, being self first is not selfish.
I like that. Yes. There's a quote by Glennon Doyle that I like a lot too about boundaries, where it's boundaried people can be nice and nice people can have boundaries.
I love that. I love Glennon Doyle, and I love that quote. I am
Yeah.
going to start saying that more often.
Yeah. 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 Um, Okay, we got off on a little tangent. So I want to circle back to the breath work. And so the circular breathing, we'll link to ways that people can do circular breathing with you if they're here in Colorado.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but what's something that somebody could use, a quick breath experience or tool when you're feeling the overwhelm, when you need to regulate the nervous system, and or if they're trying to really do this reconnection to themselves, to their body, to intuition, what would you recommend for
Oh,
us?
100%. Yeah, no, I've got you, babe. So, what I love about breath is, yeah, you can do so many different things with it, but it's so tied to our vagus nerve and our nervous system. So we can actually bring our nervous system back into alignment. Um, One of my favorite quick hits that I like to show folks is just box breathing. And it's called box breathing because you're going to breathe in the shape of a box, if you will. So
Yep.
you pick the count that works for you. And I will be the first to admit, when I first started doing any kind of breath work, I've always been a super rapid, shallow breather. Entire life, I went 40, probably 41 years. It's been a long journey to learn how to expand that breath. I'll be 43 in
Yep.
January. So it's taken me 2 years to get better at this. But I was a very shallow breather. So if you told me to breathe for 6 counts, I would have breathed twice. And I just
You
would
would
have
have passed out.
I would have passed out. Yeah. So you pick the count that works for you, and you're going to inhale for that count, hold for that same count, exhale for that count, and then hold for that count. I like to suggest that folks start with a count of 3 or 4. A lot of times that can feel attainable. If you're like at count 2 and you're like, start with count 2. That's totally fine. But you would inhale for 3. So inhale 1, 2, 3, hold 1, 2, 3, exhale 1, 2, 3, hold 1, 2, 3, and then go right back into that inhale. And I would suggest starting off with just 5 minutes, make it attainable. I think that's the piece that I love teaching my clients that I do any kind of coaching with, is that you've got to start with attainable baby steps. That's how we build healthy habits that will be repeatable. Is if
Yeah.
you're going to say, I'm going to do this 20 minutes, 3 times a day,
Probably
probably
not.
yeah. Yeah. And also, instead of saying I'm going to do this for 5 minutes every day, say I'm going to do this 5 minutes this week. Then I'm going to do 5 minutes twice next week, and see if you can build it up to 5 minutes a day. And
Yeah.
then see if you can do it for a little bit longer. And so
Mhm.
just work with what frequency and duration works for you. And again, and you can even build up. So let's say you started with 2 counts, maybe in a 3 weeks to a month, you're going to build up to 3 counts or 4 counts. Nowadays, I can do a 6 count breath pretty easily, but it took time. So, again, that self-compassion, meeting yourself where you're at, and letting go of any of those expectations of, if so, I think I've got even a YouTube video on box breathing, and I might suggest 4 counts on that. Do what works for your body where you are right now.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely link to your YouTube too, because you got some juicy stuff. But so the goal, be it that you want to start to expand the breath because that helps to tone the vagus nerve or helps to calm the system. Is that sort of
Yeah,
the intention?
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, what you're doing is, when we expand the breath. So we have this vagus nerve, for folks who may not be familiar with it. Starts in our brain, but it connects through our larynx and into our lungs and into our belly. So
Hmm.
as you're breathing too, I have a whole other YouTube video on diaphragmatic breathing. When we can do a full core breath, we are stimulating the vagus nerve in 2 different points, but it really brings it out of fight or flight. So this is a great, box breathing is incredible if you're in that sympathetic fight or flight um, state of being. It also can work though if you're feeling kind of free in the freeze or fawn. So if you're feeling just down, disconnected, this can help too. So just having rhythmic breath in and of
Hmm.
itself tones that vagus nerve. We talk about sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic's that fight or flight, and parasympathetic has always been known as rest or digest. We're now learning there's actually 3 pieces. There's the sympathetic, which there's the fight or flight, but then there's the oh gosh, I always switch these two, but I'll be sure to like get this right for you for the notes. But
Yeah.
I want to say it's the dorsal branch of the vagus nerve is actually our freeze. And that's where if we're feeling depressed, we're feeling down, we're feeling disconnected, we're just not wanting to re-engage with folks. That's also not where we want to be. We want our ventral branch of our vagus nerve to be activated. And
Mhm.
so toning that vagus nerve brings us more in balance rather than being so calm that we're comatose. And
Yeah.
it takes us out of that like really, really frenetic energy and just balances out where you're calm but alert.
Yeah. And we want to become skilled with our bodies to go from if this is our baseline nervous system, whenever we get activated one way or the other, to first be able to recognize we're activated and then bring ourselves back. Because, our bodies have these systems, the fight or flight systems, in order to protect us. It's the survival part of the brain.
100%.
So it's not like you're going to stop that from happening, but how skilled can you get at being like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious and panicking. I need to do some box breathing to bring that down. Because otherwise we get stuck on the stress response is stuck on all the cortisol is pumping and our bodies aren't made to handle that type of response for a prolonged period.
No, and I love the example of the gazelle running from the lion.
Yeah.
So two things that the gazelle is different than us in from us in a fight or flight. So the gazelle, first of all, once it escapes the lion, it shakes its body and then it completely forgets that it was just chased. It was like this close to death 5 minutes ago and goes about grazing again. We replay our trauma over and over and over and over again,
Yeah.
re-traumatizing ourselves, making that pathway even more robust.
Yeah.
Gazelle also, the other way it's different than us, it doesn't stop mid fleeing to be like, why am I escaping this lion right now? I need to figure this out before I can actually escape the lion,
Right.
right? So if you're in either one of those activations, you don't need to figure it out while you're activated. So if you can use
Mhm.
box breathing or some other breathing component or some other somatic, I think the work you do with EFT is beautiful too, of bringing that nervous system back to baseline. And once you feel more centered, then you can reflect on, okay, what activated me? You can kind of do a retrospective. Why was I so triggered in that moment? How much of it was that moment and how much of it was like little childhood things that, we have
Yep.
picked up along the way? Then you can start getting introspective with that.
Yeah, I share with clients when we're activated, when we're outside of our baseline, when we're in some sort of stress or trauma response, our reptilian brain is on and we have four options: the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Mhm.
So we're not in a place we don't have access literally to the parts of our brain, to the rational part of our brain, the limbic system, the emotional part of our brain. We can't access those because the other part of our brain is firing like, bitch, the lion is coming. You need to do something. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are activated and you're trying to problem solve, or say you're trying to logistically figure out how you're going to leave a relationship, it's like you can't that you're not at your full capacity in your mind unless you come into your nervous system more regulated state. So box breathing, tapping, going for a walk in nature, right? Whatever you're doing to help bring yourself back down is vital to be able to then make sense of what's happening, take the next step, heal the inner child, whatever needs to happen outside of those four options.
And I want to normalize that you might tap and you might breathe. You might do yoga, you might do meditation, you might feel it go back to baseline. And then as soon as you're done, it go back up or down. That's okay. I want to
Yeah.
normalize that, right?
Yeah.
It might take doing it over and over again. I think one of your podcast guests had mentioned that there was days when she left her relationship where she was just crying all day.
Yeah.
And it's I want to normalize that you've got to express the emotions and know that it's going to be all over the place when you're making a big decision or whatever that emotional trigger is. We a lot of times that masculine energy once again tells us to push through, suck it up, buck up,
Yeah.
oh,
Don't do that. Don't do that.
to. Yeah.
There's also a difference in understanding a feeling and feeling a feeling. So I know in my experience, forever, I was very detached from feeling things. And I was like, well, but I understand that this doesn't feel good. I understand that this is not a healthy dynamic anymore. But I wasn't letting myself feel the emotions around that needed to process,
Mm.
right? I wasn't letting myself feel the sadness or the betrayal or the outright anger that I had spent years with this person under a false illusion. Like, it was like I knew those things,
Mm.
but I didn't feel those things. And when I would let myself feel it, I would be on the floor crying, like ugly cry, snot, just letting yourself go full primal almost in your expression. And I'm sure people have had the experience of after a good cry, you're like, oh, I feel lighter. I feel better. It's like, that's not just a psychological thing, like a woo thing. That's like a literal, you're moving denser energy out of your body.
100%.
And it's so important to, in your healing, to actually feel that and integrate it and move it and not just stay up here with, I understand these things,
Yeah.
because that will only take you so far. And then you'll find yourself in another relationship doing the same thing because that, like, you haven't actually shifted the internal piece.
Thank you for sharing that too, because that reminds me, I've also experienced that where I'm just like, I can rationalize the feeling, but I can't feel the feeling.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think I'm drawn to the circular connective transformative breath is we do it through our mouth. And so you are actually intentionally activating your sympathetic nervous system
Yeah.
in a way that'll allow stuck emotions to arise to the surface. So if folks are kind of like, cool, cool, yeah, yeah, I totally get what you're saying, but how do I feel the feeling?
Right.
Somatic therapies can be a tool to help get you there.
You have to feel safe.
Yeah.
Again, to the point of the lion,
Yeah.
I don't have time to sit down and think about how I'm feeling and cry because the lion's coming at me. First, I need to get away from the lion.
Yeah.
And then I need to bring myself back into safety. And when we're safe, then we're not in the hypervigilance and we can turn inward and start being, introspective, inquisitive around what's happening. But if we're never getting to that safe place, then that work isn't going to work, which is also why it's so important to find a practitioner that you feel safe with.
Yes.
Because if you have a therapist or a coach that you don't really feel safe with, or you find yourself performing for, or trying to take care of, it's like you might be talking about your problems, but you're not allowing yourself to really drop in to be witnessed in your pain and to be held in that experience of crying about whatever for the first time and really letting that come through, or yelling for the first time about something that you just need to get out of your body. So if you're listening and you have a practitioner that you don't feel like you can ugly cry in front of, it's something to be aware of as you're shopping for people to hold safe space.
I fully 100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for literally forever.
Same.
And for the sake of everybody's time, um, is there anything you want to leave people with that we haven't touched on in terms of anything, but inspiring them to keep going if they're in some part of this journey?
Yeah, I think, my brother and I just had this conversation. He was visiting me a couple months ago, and he's also, grew up in the same house, and he also went through a divorce in his 20s. And I asked him, "Do you ever regret, that marriage?" Because it was a very whirlwind, chaotic marriage. Because we were talking about my ex as well, and he said, "I thought long and hard about this. I don't regret any decision I've ever made or any way that all of this has played out, because now he is married with this beautiful, beautiful 2-year-old little girl that we adore so much." He said, "All roads led me to this, and I would never trade this." And I can echo that when I think about my life, and I know that I'm still on this journey. But man, my life is so good right now. So when I think about those times of I should have left earlier, I don't know how that would have played out. And so it
Yeah.
played out how it needed to, that I felt ready and I didn't pressure myself to leave before I was ready. And I would be somewhere. I'm sure it'd be amazing, but I wouldn't be where I'm right now. And I wouldn't give that up for the world. And so it's
Yeah.
okay if you are someone who's just left a relationship and are in that mode. Yeah, I've been there. I see you. But know that there is, no matter where your journey takes you, there's always beauty on the other side.
Yeah.
And everything is unfolding as it should.
Yeah. There's a lot of blind faith, a lot of blind trust in the next chapter. And I'm smiling because of a conversation that you and I had not too long ago where you were reminding me of all of these different chapters in our life. And you were like, if you had the full scope of what your entire book was going to be like, and they showed you that you were going to have a real shit relationship for 4 years, you would have been like, no thanks. Like
Yeah.
we take, or we are given things one thing at a time so that we can handle one thing at a time, and trusting that, like, yeah, that chapter was fucked up and it's led me to this conversation with you,
Right.
having a podcast, having a business, helping women heal from this type of shit. Like, what? I
Amazing.
could never I could never have anticipated or expected that in a million years. If you would have told me before I met him that that was the trajectory, I would have been like,
I think
doubtful.
I don't know if you watched the Barbie movie, but when she is
Yeah.
offered, you can stay how the shoe, or it's like you can stay exactly as you are, or go to reality. She's like the shoe. I want to go back to the way things were. She's like, let's try this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Wrong answer.
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's important to remember, and even proving that to yourself by looking at your life thus far. Like, what has happened where you thought you would never get through it, and then you got through it and something beautiful came on the other side of it. It's like using your own past as the proof. I know I do that often, where I'm like, get into the mistrusting place with the universe or whatever, and it's like, okay, but all these other times it's actually worked out, so let's just take a beat, do some box breathing.
We have 100%, or we have, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We have survived 100% of the things that have happened to us if we're listening
Yeah.
to this podcast right now.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they all feel good or that it wasn't traumatizing and painful and all the things, but trusting in the bigger picture, trusting in the bigger story, the bigger, you know, reason
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
why.
It'll make for a good book.
A good book. It's gonna be a great read.
Yeah, good. New York's bestseller week one.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I always like to end these with a card pull.
Oh, yes, please. I love that deck.
Yes, if I can have you close your eyes, I'm going to have you help choose the card that is for the highest and best of all of those who are listening. So just putting your intention in the deck, and whenever you feel like the shuffle is complete, just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
What do we get? See-through.
Ooh.
This just came up for a client of mine yesterday. I'm going to read it to you because I don't have these memorized. And they have very comical messages sometimes. See-through brings a message of transparency and clarity. It reminds you to not get lost in the content. Others may want to spin you a tale, but don't be fooled. Cut through the drama and the noise to see or hear what is really going on. What is beneath the surface of the skin? Seek to understand what is behind the words or actions of another, the underlying need. Don't trust the words alone. See-through also reminds you that transparency is a brilliant tool for living and relating authentically. How are you showing yourself to others? Are you clouding their ability to see you with too many words? Are your words not aligned with your actions? Where might you unveil the parts of yourself that would be helpful for others to see you more clearly?
I love that.
Yeah, it aligns nicely with with your vulnerability and authenticity in sharing some of these pieces that you haven't said out loud before.
Yeah. Align with your higher self, be authentic, and put yourself out there. I love it.
Yeah. where do you want to leave people in order to find you for breathwork or to connect? Where can people get
100%.
you?
So I have a website, amyjinkscoaching.com. I also can be found at Amy Jinks on YouTube and Amy Jinks on Instagram. And the Jinx is Jinx. So yeah, and if you're in the Colorado area or even traveling through and want to come do either individual or group breath work, I do hold those sessions. And I do also do virtual coaching. And I'm hoping to actually be launching here very soon a breathing circle that will be virtual and in person for folks to do other kinds of breathing modalities and just kind of hold a sacred circle for folks.
Love it. Love it. Yes. If you are looking for a practitioner who can weave in the physical, the nutrition, the nutrition and the exercise piece of body awareness and body shifting with more of the mind-based work and the body-based with breath work and the spiritual based with your crazy intuitive skills. We didn't even touch on that. We'll have to do another episode on connecting with your intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't speak more highly of you as a woman, as a practitioner, as a space holder. Your heart is just so big for the people that you work with, the people who are in your life. Like, you are just such a gem. You're such a gem.
You are such a light in my life, and I appreciate you. And I'm grateful and honored to be on your podcast today. I'm always just applauding you and rooting you on, and you're doing such beautiful work. And it's so beautiful to see as your friend and as a former client and as a colleague. So I adore you.
Yes, yes. Well, I'll be sure to put all of the links to everything that you shared in the podcast description. So those of you who are listening, be sure to check out all that she has to offer. And if this was beneficial to you, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. This is how we help spread the word and help people feel like they're less alone. So until next time, thank you, Amy, so much. I appreciate you. I love you. And I'll see you all next time.
Love you.
Remember that the holiday promo is good through all of December for $200 off my Awakening private coaching program. All of the information is in the show notes.